I think we'll get started. So welcome everybody to the 40th anniversary of the Teaching Games for Understanding model webinar series. During these 5 sessions, we will be discussing assessment in games-based approaches. Today we have Dr. Naoki Suzuki, who will be presenting on a framework of learning assessment in games-based approaches. I will pass you over to Dr. Suzuki. If you would all please keep your microphones on mute for the duration of this webinar. If you have any questions, there will be a Q&A at the end. So please put any questions that you may have in the chat box. Dr. Suzuki, over to you.
Hi, hello everybody. So good morning and good afternoon, good evening. I'm Naoki Suzuki. So thank you for joining us today for the webinar series hosted by the Teaching Games for Understanding Special Interest Group. I'm Naoki Suzuki. I belong to Tokyo Gakuen University in Japan. So I'm in charge of today's webinar. I'm very glad to see you online. So this year marks the exact 40th anniversary of the birth of the Teaching Games for Understanding in 1982. Therefore, so there are many commemorative events planned for the 2022. This webinar series is one of them. So Ellen, so treasurer of the TGFU SIG, has been very helpful in organizing this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to thank her very much. I would like to talk about framework of learning assessment in game-based approaches. So if you have any questions, please send it to me via chat. So before I get into the main topic, so let me give you a brief introduction of myself. My specialty is the pedagogy of physical education. As you can see in the slide presentation of my representative works. So I have been presenting my achievement for better physical education. In particular, I specialize in learning assessment theory and making use of game teaching. And recently, I have been working on technology related to those studies. So now this webinar is intended to contribute to the understanding of learning assessment in GBAs and to develop future research and practices based on that understanding. The 5 sessions are closely related and you are encouraged to attend all of them. I will be in charge of the first and third sessions. The second session will be led by Dr. Steve Mitchell. And the 4th session will be led by Dr. Karen Richardson. In the 5th session, in addition to the 3 professors, 2 practitioners will report on their assessment practices for game teaching and discuss future assessments based on those reports. So please see the slide. It's today's agenda. At first, so I am going to tell you about an overview of the game-based approach. After that, so I will talk about the general definition and function of learning assessment. Then I will summarize the key points of learning assessment practices in the game-based approach based on above. So then specific points will be explained while watching a video of the lesson with the GBA. Anyway, so let's start my presentation. So there are a variety of game-based approaches. The most famous is Teaching Games for Understanding, which was proposed by Bunker and Thorpe of Loughborough University in the UK in 1982. So it can be said that the TGFU is the source of all the other approaches shown in the slide. Later in the US, the tactical games model was developed, which had a strong influence on Japan as well. So in Singapore, the game concept approach was developed under the strong influence of the US TGM. So, and in Australia, more flexible approaches such as game sense and play practice were developed. Although there are differences in teaching approaches, they all share the same approach of learning through game experience. So last year, the TGFU SIG officially announced that such approaches are collectively called game-based approach. In other words, please understand that this webinar is intended to teach not only TGFU, but also its derivative models. So game-based approaches are developed based on social constructivist learning. In other words, so learning in GBA can be thought of as shown in the slide. First, learning is not the passive and mechanical acquisition of knowledge and skills given to us by others, but the acquisition of knowledge and skills by working with objects, things, and society to construct problems. Secondly, learning is not something that is taught by others, but something that is acquired by oneself by observing and imitating others in the culture. Therefore, the role of the teacher is not to give the kids the content of learning, but to connect the kids to the activity and create the content of learning. So game-based approach is a method of teaching in which students learn and deepen their understanding of the inherent fun of the type game through appropriate game activities and with appropriate teacher support. So appropriate games should be those that allow students to participate enthusiastically in the game with a sense of purpose and tasks, and to experience the fun of the competition specific to that type of game. So from the perspective of teaching these disciplines, I think we need to start by changing the basic premise of the game, which is that you need to acquire the minimum skills and rules required for the discipline in order to participate in the game. So which requires skill practice. This means that sports should be something that all students can enjoy and challenge, not just the gifted ones. So based on this premise, we aim to develop human beings who can be involved in sports throughout their lives. So not only as players, but also as spectators, parents, coaches, etc. So we introduce ways to help them feel the joy of playing sports and develop their confidence and abilities in order to create realistic and learning situations for kids. We use games and so change the form of the games to turn practice into play. Oh, I basically so believe that games and ball movement classes do not need to practice individual skills such as catching or batting exercise. Basically, I believe that everything should be taught in a game situation, starting with warming up. So then, what about individual skills? So I think they should be treated as motor skills on the physical fitness. Circle passing, catching, passing practice, and batting practice are interesting activities in which students manipulate the equipment. The curriculum should be managed in such a way that the content of these activities and ball games are related to the content of volleyball. And the students should learn to move back and forth between units. So the basic principle of game-based approach is the idea of game as teacher. This is similar to the way video games work. If you are absorbed in the game, you will gradually so understand how to behave in it and become good at it. As you do so, the task moves to a slightly more difficult stage, even if you don't do well at first. So your knowledge and skills of how to participate in the game will gradually so improve, and you will be able to complete it. Then you move on to more difficult stages in this way. So it is as if the conditions of the game change as you get better and better. The goal of game-based approaches is to improve players' tactical awareness, tactical understanding, and problem-solving competencies. So through game experiences, thereby improving their game performance. We also hope that this tactical knowledge will be transferable. The content that can be transferred to each other is organized as a game category. In other words, games such as soccer, handball, and basketball are invasion games where offense and defense intertwine and compete with each other. And there are common tactics that can be used in other disciplines. So learning assessment in such an instructional approach is the content of this webinar. So learning assessment is defined as a process in which changes that occur through learning are judged according to certain criteria, and how to proceed with learning and teaching is considered. The first function of assessment is to help students understand and assess themselves as learners. Secondly, it has the function of confirming the success or failure of the teacher's teaching and making use of it to make the teaching more reasonable and effective. From this, it can be said that learners use learning assessment to reflect on their own learning and think about their future learning. And the teachers use learning assessment to reflect on learners' learning achievements and think about their future teaching. So in other words, so if the instructional plan is like a map of teaching practice, then learning assessment is about identifying where the learners are on the map. Repeated learning assessment creates a history of learning on the learning map. The third function is to be used in filling out the report card and other requirements using the learning history. This is an adjunct function. And the priority should be on assessment to move learning and teaching forward. So good assessment is essential for better learning and teaching. Learning and assessment, teaching, and are inextricably so linked, and better learning and teaching cannot be achieved without better assessment. For this reason, the content of this webinar is very important. So assessment is often understood to be similar to measurement and evaluation. However, these are different ways of judging learning outcomes. There is also grading, so which is recorded with letters and symbols. In other words, the third function of assessment is to be used in meeting the needs of inclusion in the curriculum and the other requirements. In the United States, this means that the knowledge, performance, attitude, etc. of the learner is translated into the symbols E, S, or U. So also it refers to the process of converting knowledge, performance, and attitude into numbers such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in this discussion, I would like to omit this so-called grading process. I am focusing on the assessment mainly. So first, I would like to consider the measurement. So Hoplo defines it as testing students to determine how much they have learned, and then recording the test objectively. So Lean states that it is the process of focusing on and so quantifying results without questioning the process. So in other words, so measurement is the process of obtaining information that is quantitatively expressed, subjective, and so accurately measured. Therefore, it requires reliability and validity, typically measured as a score on the test. Evaluation can be criticized for needing to be the objective. It is done by interrupting the objective or qualitative information through subjective judgments. That is, it is evaluation because it is subjective. And it can be said that such a criticism is made by switching the issues of subjective reliability and validity. For example, it means subjectively judging learning outcomes based on test results. So there is some confusion over the difference between assessment and evaluation. In general, so they can be distinguished from 2 points of view. So in this way, the structure of judgment on the learning can be explained as shown in the figure. Throughout the course of learning, qualitative and quantitative information is collected and evaluated. As learning and teaching deepen, so evaluation is carried out with a certain level of cohesion. And so values are assessed as the learning and teaching deepens. The information is collected and assessed. Then at a certain point in time, this repetition is converted into symbols and so numbers, and the grade called grading is assigned. However, what supports this is assessment and how to correct the history of learning and how to evaluate the learning while encountering this information. In other words, so Hay and Wiggins, who were the first to use the term curriculum mapping in the context of the concept of learning history, were the first to use it. As they point out, it is essential to distinguish between the different types of judgment. This is one of the most confusing points of view and measure problem for being better assessment. I have already mentioned that GBA is based on the idea of social constructivist learning. This slide shows some of the key terms associated with this social constructivist learning and related assessments. These can be said to be the result of a shift in the way we think about learning to constructivism. For example, the stakeholder approach and moderation assessment brought the concepts of participation and collaboration into assessment. Accountability is also a form of participation and collaboration in that it involves the active involvement in education of people who are previously considered to be the primary participants. In this regard, so Dr. Pengrazi also stated that important issues in physical education is the sharing of standards between the parents and the teachers. And I think it is well to say that this is a measure that contributes to this. The concepts of moderation assessment, educational nature of assessment, and authentic assessment imply that not only learners, but also teachers should develop and that assessment should help them develop. So in addition, the perspectives of authentic assessment, complex outcomes, and goal-free evaluation are new perspectives on authentic learning outcomes. What we can see from these perspectives is a shift from the traditional plan, do, see approach of teaching, letting students learn, evaluating, and then moving on to the next cycle. In other words, the boundaries between teaching, learning, and assessment will become blurred. And so they will become embedded in the act of participating in the class. So Skett et al. Also noted that the process of learning, teaching, and assessment can be thought of as a braided string as shown in the figure on the slide. Based on this, Stiggins et al. So stated that assessment can be an instructional tool that promotes learning rather than evaluating it. Koppel stated that assessment for learning occurs not after teaching and learning, but in the midst of it, and described the process as seamless, in which learning, teaching, and assessment are inextricably linked. I have suggested that the importance of communication as learning assessment, in which a learning, teaching, and assessment function in unison in communication situation. It seems that we have emphasized only the superficial aspects of value judgment as a methodology by obscuring the phases of judgment, such as assessment and evaluation. However, this aspect of value judgment must be highlighted in the relationship between judgment as problem solving and judgment as interpretation of the situation and context in learning and teaching. So therefore, in order to breathe life into the theory of assessment, which has so far been disregarded and has been concerned only with externalities, and we must work to explore the contents of these two. So learning assessment does not function as a value judgment of the result of learning, but as something that demonstrates the pedagogical nature in the continuum of learning. In this sense, so assessment is a very important part of our teaching. We often hear the phrase, "It is difficult to think about assessment," which implies the message that teaching, learning, and so assessment are separate. And we need to move away from this perception. There is also the idea of creating physical education classes based on standards. But in the end, so I think this is just another way of thinking about learning and teaching while considering assessment. So therefore, the assessment tends to be given so-called image. But I think it is necessary to affirm that evaluation assessment is an essential element in making classes. So Beck stated the process of being is fundamentally a process of learning. According to Gunn, so learning emerged from our sensory, perceptual, and cognitive interactions with self and between self and other, self and the world, and self and context. In other words, so it can be said that learning is deepened through interaction in the classroom. This can be taken as synonymous with the deepening of communication that occurs in the interaction. And it can be said that students learn by repeating high quality judgment as problem solving, and judgment as interpretation of the situation and context in the context of learning. In this sense, we can say that learning supported by rich communication is good learning. Based on the above, I would like to explain the key points of assessment in the game-based approaches. Okay. So teachers and learners should not assess knowledge and skills separated from the game situation and context, as in a paper test or a skill test. Learning assessment should focus on the performance demonstrated in the context of the game situation and the context. They need to focus on the performance. Thus, assessment would need to be conducted through observation and game analysis. The point number one is to assess students in the game, not the skill test. Both teachers and the students tend to focus on the on-the-ball skills. However, during a game, there are more players who are not touching the ball than those who are. So in other words, players are not in possession of the ball for the majority of the game. So therefore, they need to pay attention to the of the ball movements. The point number two is to assess not only on the ball skill, but also the of the ball movement. So you don't just focus on the result of what the player did during the game. You should try to interpret what the player was trying to do in the game context of the situation. That is, assessing the game performance includes skill execution and decision making. The point number three is to assess game performance while linking skill execution and decision making. As for the criteria for assessment, teachers should prepare the games in such a way that the kids become aware of the criteria when designing the game. So kids need to be made aware of the criteria through their experience in the game, rather than being presented with the criteria by the teacher. Since the criteria are closely related to the task, it is important to have a game experience that clarifies the criteria and to ask questions that encourage appropriate reflection and self-assessment. The point number 4 is to build the criteria through the gameplay. As student skills and decision-making increase, more complex games will be needed. The teacher will design games that will increase those skills for them. In other words, changes in the game can be seen as a deepening of students' learning. So therefore, the point number 5 is to assess the process of changing the game as learning progression. So I am going to show you the video clips. So the video I'm about to show you is a net and world type game lesson I taught college students as 6th graders in elementary school. The video you will see is a 12 minutes version of a 45 minutes lesson. So this is the first time that I have taught the net and world type game to my students. And I made it so them look back. Oh, okay. I made them look back at their previous learning of the invasion game and the target games, so that they would have an outlook on their learning. By reflecting on their learning, yes. Yes, I made them look back at their previous learning of the invasion game and the target games, so that they would have an outlook on their learning. By reflecting on their learning, the students seem to have gained an awareness of how they would learn. So at the beginning of the class, so students played a warm-up game. This time, they played a game of throwing a ball up and down. The throwers tried to raise the ball to a certain height by shifting their timing, so that receiver would not take the ball. So it's a game that simplifies scoring competition of volleyball game. So both in terms of skills and cognition. Reflecting on the game, I asked the students to clarify that they were competing in a net and world type game. I then explained how the game is played. So I made 12 teams with 4 players per team. The game is a 2-on-2 competition. So the goal of the game is to score points by dropping the ball into the opponent's court. So the ball can be caught, thrown, and connected. So they work together with their teammates in their own team to connect the ball so that they can attack better in the opponent's court. At first, try it out first to understand what kind of game it is. The game time is shortened So, and the players are exchanged while playing the game to reflect on and so understand the game. So when I observe the game and so assesses that the students have a general understanding of the game, I have the student recorded the game. So will be used as the first game to be compared in the second half of the class. Therefore, have the students decide in advance where to film the second half of the game so that it will be the same. So after 20 seconds, the students are asked if they want to save the video, and they can decide in if they want to look back on the video later. So if they think it is unnecessary, they can delete it. If they definitely want to look back on it, they can save it with a number to mark it as number 3. If they think it is better to look back, they can save it as number 2, and so on. So this decision is a very act of assessing the game. Repeatedly they perform this action to assess the game and improve it. Through this act of assessment, we were able to find a transformation in the assessment of skills and decision making. So afterwards, they gathered everyone together and had them reflect on the game. They watched the video recorded by each team using the numbers as clues. So the teams then discussed how they should attack and defend and decide on their own task. They wrote these tasks on the electric whiteboard to make them aware of their goals. Yes, now, so they are watching the movie for their reflection. And after watching the video clips, so they wrote down so their goals on the electric whiteboard. This is a so electric whiteboard. Yeah. Yes. In addition, so they repeated the same process of game participation by recording the game, deciding to save or delete it, and so assessing the game after a certain amount of repetition. So when the students were able to assess their understanding of the game, the two teammates who were observing the game were asked to watch the game, provide a commentary. So and so record the content along with the game video. This time, so they filmed the entire game. So the recording time was about 2 minutes. The students already had a point of view to explain, since they had created and curated criteria while playing the game. They were able to interpret and assess the facts of the game from that perspective. And by having two students working together instead of one, so they were able to listen to the opinion of others, students, and say what they thought. and that information also became important assessment information. When this method was used without criteria, the comments would have been very few, encouraging and abstract. But the students with criteria were able to assess the comments on the game concretely. This is a scene where they are assessing their own game while checking the video with comments. As the students listen to the comments, they said things like, indeed, and so is that really so? So as they listen to the comments, afterwards, the student checks the whiteboard on which they had written their goals and confirmed that their team had achieved their goals. Then have them summarize what they discussed and so record it on the whiteboard in 10 seconds. The reason I choose 10 seconds is to focus on what they want to say. I think it is also important to assess what they record in their assessment to sharpen so their tactical understanding. Yeah, 10 seconds is very short. So students were able to mark on the whiteboard and so record what they were able to do and what they were not able to do. So as well as their outlook on how to make it better using a short communication device. Yeah, this is self-assessment in Japanese. Sorry. Okay. So students were able to mark on. So in addition, so they played the game. They had them record the game at the same location where we had first filmed it, and that was the second half of the game. I asked the students to compare the first half game with the second half game, and so assess the changes. So as a result of the assessment, yeah, you can you can understand the so differences between so first half so play and so second half play. Right one so is second half, so their play is very quick. They can so assess their performance on this device. As a result of the assessment, the students remarked that at first they were fumbling with the ball, but they realized that it was better to turn the ball quickly and return it to the opponent's court. They also realized that attacking at the edge of the net is more aggressive. So when they picked up the ball, the person without the ball would move to the edge of the net and accurately pass the ball there to attack. So based on this realization, I asked the students to devise ways to cooperate in the game. This is the scene of the discussion. I also judged that the students' skills and the decision making were improving. So I made so them so play the ball when so sending it to the other court as a 3-on-3 game. You can see the 3-on-3 game next. This is a game plan on the tablet. They play the game with 3 versus 3. So their performance must be improved very much. So this time, and so have the student write it as a strategy on the whiteboard and submit it to the teacher. The teacher observes the game or while looking at the strategy and evaluated assessed the game performance. I think you can see the game performance has changed a lot. So after going over the strategy again and confirming what they learned in the class, students play a game to confirm their learning. This is an assessment to confirm what they have assessed in the game. It's also that most of students in this lesson were not good at physical activities. They started to say that they enjoyed this game. So they also seem to be able to experience a sense of participation in the game. So finally, so as a summary of the entire class, the students self-assess or record it on their tablets and submit it to the teacher. The teacher listened to the submitted recording and so made comments back to the students. Yeah, this is self-assessment. Huh? So in this video, I have only introduced the approximate flow of the process. But from next time, I would like to show this assessment method in detail. Summary there. So assessment in the game-based approaches must focus on performance during the game. The assessment should focus not only on the ball skill, but also of the ball movement. In addition, these performance manifestations should be used to assess skill demonstration and decision making. The methodologies are those that devise a way to record and give appropriate feedback on this game performance by recording and observation. This is an appropriate assessment tool for teaching and learning. We will introduce the specific methodologies in the next webinar and beyond. Okay, so that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Naoki, for that. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Please put them in the chat or put your hand up. No?
I was trying to. Hi, Helen. I was trying
Hiya.
Is Claudio?
Hi,
I
Claudia.
was trying to type it, but I was taking too long. Perhaps it's faster that we could just put the question in live. Yes.
Yes,
So,
please do.
congratulations, Dr. Suzuki, on your presentation. It was very, very good. So the potential is huge and very clear. I was wondering if you could give us some advice. For example, in my country, one of the reasons as why experienced in-service teachers and even beginning teachers, they sometimes are resilient to accept new approaches, is that they use the argument of the physical activity levels. So I was wondering, because this kind of interactions require some breaking in the physical activity levels during the lesson. How do you cater for that in the whole syllabus organization? So do you try to compensate in some manner, or for example, use it in one unit of teaching, just they stop more and compensate? Or what advice can you give us for taking this message to our teachers in a way that they accept it better?
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. Which country do you live?
Sorry, Portugal.
Oh, Portugal. Oh,
Yeah.
I have never been there. So your country incorporated TJ field into the PE.
Well, it's still a work in progress. So we are more advanced in the coach education, because we have a direct input in the programs, in the coach education programs.
Oh, that's great. So my opinion. So we have a lot of seminars for the teaching how to teach ball game using the TJ field. So workshop is better for us, and so I incorporated many workshops into the teacher training course, and so as you saw my teaching style, video clip. So I demonstrated how to use TJ field for students. They experience my teaching style on campus. Then they can deliver this teaching style into the school during the teaching practice. Teaching. I forget the term. Yes, teaching practice in the lead school. Then teacher lead teacher, in-service teacher, understand how to teach ball game from the college students. That's a good interaction.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
Hi, Helen. Hi, Naoki.
Hiya.
Hi, Francesco.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, hi. Hello.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. You give us very interesting thoughts for our work with game-based approaches. I have a question for you. I am very interested to use new technologies during teaching and learning processes. But in this respect, I wondering to ask which is the age of your students? Because I believe I can use these technologies within educational process only for some ages, no? So which is the age of your students, and what do you believe it's the good age for introducing technologies during learning process?
Yeah, we are trying to using the technology for K to 12 students. Even kindergarten, so we can use technology teaching. It's easy and so very beneficial for kids. If so, we use technology there. So in the future, I am going to your country. Then I'm going to show you how to teach TJFU using technology. I know that your country has a very advanced technology there.
Yes, but the use of technology in teaching process is not in advance as you can. Okay, so it's very interesting for us to work to introduce technology in all the educational process.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you very much.
I am just looking at the time, and I was just wondering if there's any more questions. I would like to make a note right now that I will be completing your certificates of attendance and emailing them out this weekend. If you do not receive your certificate by Tuesday, please do drop the TGFU SIG an email and we can send this out. Just checking any last comments.
Yes, sir, there is a question in the chat.
Thank you. So how can I engage all students to class in this model? From Alpa Korkmaz. So Naoki, how can you engage all students?
Oh, thank you very much. From Walter, so very good question. So today's session, I just focus on assessment. Yes, it's very important for us to transfer the assessment to the grading, and so this is my opinion, and so I will talk about this issue. So maybe next session. I think we have to focus on the process of the changing during the units. That's very important, and so we have to measure the changes based on the standard. Then standard is very important. Standard and criteria is very important, and I guess we should make a rubric for the grading. Walter, so are you okay?
Thank you.
Oh, Alpha. Where from?
I'm from Turkey.
Oh, Turkey.
Yes, Istanbul. I live in Istanbul.
Oh, very famous city.
I joined this webinar with my teacher. Özlem Alagül also in here with us. We are very happy to being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So I have a question. So your country has a grading on the report card. Yeah,
So,
grading is important.
I don't understand.
Yeah, you are interested in grading. Is it right?
Yes. Yeah, we grade students in physical education, but it's symbolic. We also we use a formative assessment for their process and observe students their participation especially, and we give them a grade 100 or up A+ to physical education.
Oh, yeah. We have a same system, but so I I recommend my country incorporate the e-portfolio instead of the
E-portfolio, yes.
yeah
We
e-portfolio.
use it.
Oh really?
We use it. Yes, we use CISO and Google
Oh.
Class applications for it.
Yeah.
We for 2 years at the beginning of pandemic, you know, we used these applications for e-portfolio.
Yeah.
We will continue to use that.
That's great. Yeah, so we should continue talking about grading. Yeah, after that, yeah, next session.
Okay, thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
please come again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Anything anyone else would like to say? If you do have any questions, you can always contact the TGFU email and we can pass them on to Naoki for you. So I think we'll conclude it there. Thank you everybody for attending. We do have our webinar 2 next Saturday at the same time, and we hope we can see you in the future. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.